All right, let's jump right in. We're about to travel way, way back in time. We're talking over 2,000 years to dig into this really surprising and, surprisingly modern debate about what it means to be a leader.
So, let me ask you something. When you think of a leader, what's the first image that pops into your head? I'm guessing it's probably not an ancient Athenian housewife, right? Someone who's pretty much stuck at home all day. Well, get ready, because the material we're looking at today is going to completely flip that idea on its head. It's pretty fascinating.
So our guide for this whole thing is a dialogue from way back around 370 BCE, written by this guy, the historian Xenophon. It's this ancient Greek text, right? But, and this is the cool part, we're looking at it through the lens of a modern business case study. I mean, how wild is that? It just perfectly sets up this conversation that feels ancient and, at the same time, like it could be happening right now.
Okay, so who are the main characters in this story? Well, you've got the one and only Socrates, the famous philosopher, and he's chatting with this wealthy Athenian guy named Ischomachus.
The whole conversation kicks off when Socrates basically asks Ischomachus, hey, how is your estate so perfectly run? What's your secret? And Ischomachus, he puffs out his chest a bit and says the secret is his wife. And not just his wife, but the fact that he personally educated her to be this incredible household manager.
And then, right out of the gate, Ischomachus says something that just sounds, well, shockingly modern. He calls their marriage a perfect partnership. Not, him as the boss and her as the subordinate, but a team. Like they're yoked together, working towards the same goal. That word, partnership, that's going to be really important, so hang on to it.
All right, so if she's a partner leader, what does that even mean? What does she actually do? Let's get into the specifics of the job description Ischomachus lays out for her.
Okay, so you see this division of labor, and at first glance it looks totally standard for the time, right? She's the queen bee indoors, he's out farming and doing politics. But here's the twist. Ischomachus makes this claim that would have been pretty radical back then. He says both of these jobs, the indoor work and the outdoor work, are equally important. He's not saying her work is less than, he's actually elevating it to the same level as his. And just look at her job description. This is not just, dusting and tidying up. This is straight up management. She has to be a master of resources, a judge who hands out rewards and punishments to the staff, a teacher who trains people, and then you get to this last part, which is just mind-blowing. He literally challenges her, prove you're better than me at this, and I'll become your servant. Wow.
And if you had any doubt about how seriously he takes this role, look at the words he uses to describe her. These are not domestic terms. He calls her a guardian of the laws, a commander of a garrison, the council, and a queen. I mean, think about that. He's borrowing the most powerful language he can find, from politics, from the military, all male-dominated fields, to talk about her power inside the home.
This whole idea is so out there, so radical for the time, that it completely floors Socrates. He blurts out, "By Hera, your wife has a truly masculine mind." And you have to understand, in their world, things like leadership, justice, being in command, those are all seen as masculine traits. So Socrates' comment, this is a huge turning point in our story. Was that actually a compliment, or was it something else entirely?
To figure that out, we have to hit the pause button on this perfect-sounding philosophical idea for a second. We need to look at what life was actually like in Athens.
Yeah, this vision Ischomachus paints sounds pretty great, but was it real? Let's talk about the reality. What did the law books say?
Well, the reality was pretty grim, and a world away from that ideal. A citizen woman in Athens was basically treated like a legal minor her whole life. For anything official, she needed a male guardian, a kurios. First her dad, then her husband. She couldn't speak in court, she couldn't even issue a summons. Her main value to society? To produce a legitimate male heir. Her purity, her very being, was considered the property of the men in her family. So much for being a queen.
And there it is. That's the core conflict, laid out side by side. You've got this beautiful idea of a wife as a partner, a leader, a commander, and then you've got the harsh reality of the law, where she's basically under the control of a male guardian with almost zero rights of her own. So, what gives? How do you square that circle?
This is where things get really juicy, because now we have to ask, who was Ischomachus really? Was he this amazing, forward-thinking mentor, or was he, well, a mansplainer? Now, using the word mansplaining might seem a little weird for an ancient text.
but the scholars who analyze this use it as a framework. And it kind of fits, doesn't it? It's a lens to look at the power dynamics in a conversation where a husband is, in painstaking detail, explaining his wife's job to her.
So let's explore that. On the one hand, maybe we should take him at his word. Maybe he really was a progressive guy for his time, a kind of proto-feminist, trying to give his wife as much power and agency as he possibly could within a really restrictive system.
But then there's the other side of the coin, the more cynical view. Was he really empowering her, or was he just making her a better, more efficient manager of her own cage, just training her to run her own prison really, really well?
And that brings us right back to Socrates and his masculine mind comment. When you think about it that way, was it a compliment at all? Or was it the ultimate insult? Is he basically saying, wow, she's so good at her job, she's almost like a man? You see how that reinforces the idea that leadership is naturally a male thing, and any woman who's good at it is just an exception to the rule?
You know, this whole complicated mess isn't just some dusty old philosophical debate. This tension, these questions, they echo right into our world today, especially when we talk about leadership.
I mean, it is absolutely wild how many of these ancient ideas pop up in modern leadership theory. That whole "make me your servant" line, that's basically the core of what we now call servant leadership. Getting your staff to want to follow you? Hello, transformational leadership. And the perfect partnership? That's relational leadership. It was all right there, nearly 2,500 years ago.
So what this story really does is it pulls back the curtain on this timeless conflict we are still dealing with today. It's the gap between the language of empowerment and the reality of the constraints people are under. It's one thing to talk a good game about partnership and leadership, but it's another thing entirely to have the actual real power to lead.
And so that's the big question this whole story leaves us with for us right now. When we talk about empowering people in our jobs, in our lives, what are we really doing? Are we genuinely breaking down barriers and giving them real freedom and authority? Or are we just training them to be really, really good at operating within the limitations we've set? It's a question from ancient Greece that could not be more relevant today. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.